Chapter 041, Ronaldo's POV. I kept having the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. Every time I considered the traitor within our pack, someone who is working against us from within, my stomach turned. However, there was something even more sinister out there. The Underworld Council had their own plans, and I had the unsettling impression that I was merely a pawn in their scheme. The rogue wolves were one thing. The alphas I had just managed to rally behind me were standing at the head of the room. The weight of their mistrust and old grudges hung in the air like a storm ready to break, creating a thick tension. The realization of the Underworld Council's manipulation began to gnaw at my insides, just as the victory over the rogue wolves had finally set in. My relationship with Valeria was rooted in a curse that dated back many generations. The Underworld Council representatives, who had consented to meet with me in secret, turned to face me. With their hooded cloaks covering their eyes, they remained as frigid as ever. I didn't trust them, but I couldn't do anything else at the moment. I stated, "I need answers," in a steady but subtly angry tone. How are Valeria and I related to the curse? One of them leaned forward, an older woman with soul-piercing eyes. Her voice was like ice. "The original Alpha King is linked to your lineage. You and your partner were never supposed to be torn apart by the curse. It's intended to unite you and unleash a force that has the capacity to transform everything, for better or worse." Her words were like a slap to my head. I could never have imagined how terrible the truth was. The ability to alter all werewolves' futures, but at what price? What if Valeria and I were unable to regulate it? Before I could comprehend this, a voice, not from the council, but from a deeper, darker place, echoed in my head. "The war has not ended yet." The words chilled me, and I scanned the darkened room, my senses alert. Something else was there, something that was just out of my line of sight. Right now, I couldn't let my guard down, not when I was going to discover something so harmful. The council's smirks made me feel even more uneasy. What would happen if we did band together? What becomes of our familiar world? I insisted. The older woman's lips formed a half-smile, half-worn expression. "Ronaldo, you don't get it. You're talking about a future that might end badly. This kind of power is never granted. It must be earned via sacrifice. Will you bear the cost?" Everything went dark before I could respond. The room was rocked by an explosion, and the floor shook under my feet. The vile stench of charred flesh filled the air. Malik Blackthorn's forces had already arrived, so I didn't have to look to see who it was. "Remain back," I shouted, pushing the council members to the ground as I made my way to the exit. There was no time to reflect, no time to think things through. The conflict was already underway. "Ronaldo!" As I walked outside, I heard someone shout. Valeria's voice was panicked. I didn't pause to respond. The danger was too great, and the world was too fast. Malik's army was everywhere, racing past me with crazed eyes. They were pursuing something much more sinister than power. I had been duped by the Underworld Council, with all their secrets. I was only a pawn in their scheme. However, it was now evident that territory was not the only factor in this conflict. It had to do with control. Control over Valeria, control over me, control over all werewolves. "Ronaldo!" Valeria's voice broke through my thoughts again, and this time I turned. Her eyes were wide with terror as she rushed toward me. I grabbed her, pulling her close. I said, "Stay with me," but there was no time for assurances. The battle had already begun. Malik's wolves were too well organized and too powerful. Valeria muttered, "I can't lose you," and her desperate words were more devastating than any weapon. With regret and fear on my tongue, I gave her a quick, passionate kiss. "We can't lose this," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. The conflict was in full swing. Everywhere, wolves were engaged in combat. Underfoot, the ground trembled. But as soon as Valeria and I met eyes, something inside of me snapped. The struggle for survival was no longer the only one. It was a power struggle. We were the key, the council had told me, but at what cost? Then I heard it. One more voice, a shadow, hiding in the recesses of my thoughts. The voice murmured, "Ronaldo, you were never supposed to win this." I suddenly realized that Malik Blackthorn wasn't the only real enemy. It was everything else, the dark magic that had bound me to Valeria, the betrayals, the lies. Who is responsible for this? The question echoed in my head as I whispered to myself. Valeria's fear was evident as she tightened her hold on my arm. "What's going on, Reinaldo? What are they doing to us?" We had the impression that the world was falling apart. I didn't know the answers. However, I was certain that this fight was far from over. Furthermore, I wasn't sure if I was prepared for the reality. The conflict had not ended yet. It was only getting started. What comes next? Will Valeria and Reinaldo be able to withstand this betrayal? Chapter 042, Valeria's POV. I needed to locate her, the witch, the person who had cursed my relationship with Reinaldo, the one who had twisted our futures and fates and given us the keys to something much darker than I could have ever dreamed. As I moved farther into the forest, a sense of dread filled the air. Long shadows were cast by the trees that loomed overhead. I had always felt both fear and awe there. However, I was more terrified of what I might discover today than I was of the gloom all around me. Reinaldo was right behind me, and I could feel his worry seeping through our relationship. I didn't want him here, and I didn't want him to see me in this state of uncertainty and brokenness. In actuality, though, I wasn't sure if I could handle this witch by myself. "Are you certain about this, Valeria?" The dense silence was broken by Reinaldo's voice. I stopped and inhaled. The weight of what I was about to do felt like 100 tons pressing down on my chest. I must. What will it take to lift the curse? I must know. I refused to allow it to separate us. He stepped closer and insisted, "You're not alone in this." His hand was warm against my chilly skin as he reached for me. "Together, we'll figure something out." But my heart sank even as his words gave me comfort. I kept thinking that whatever I discovered today would make a huge difference. At last we came to her, a little hut at the forest's edge, its windows glowing dimly in the dusk. The witch stood outside, the last of the day's light casting a shadow over her figure. Her face was unreadable, and when she saw us, she merely gestured for us to approach without saying anything. With a voice like gravel scuffing stone, she said, "You've come. I've been anticipating you." With an air of authority, Reinaldo took a step forward. "We require clarification. How can we lift the curse you put on us?" I caught a glimpse of something, perhaps fear, in her eyes as they darted back and forth between us, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual cold demeanor. "Without a final act, the curse cannot be lifted," she stated in a flat voice. "The key is you and Reinaldo. However, breaking it results in the bond being severed entirely." The words were like a kick to the stomach. "Removing the bond?" I muttered. Slowly, she nodded. "Indeed, to break the curse, you must tear the connection between you two apart. Furthermore, that bond cannot be restored once it has been broken." My breath caught in my throat as a wave of coldness swept over me. "Is there no alternative?" Despite the tension emanating from him, Reinaldo asked in a steady, low voice. A small, melancholy smile curled the witch's lips as she shook her head. "Not unless you want to manage the curse instead of breaking it. However, there is a cost to that, a cost that may exceed what you are both willing to pay." I looked at Reinaldo, who had fear in addition to understanding in his wide eyes. "How much is it?" The witch's eyes darkened. "You have to learn the darkest magic in order to control the curse, magic that mortals were never supposed to use. Will you put your soul in danger to keep the person you care about safe?" My thoughts were racing as I stood there. The words seeped into my veins like poison. The curse could be controlled by magic. But at what price? My spirit? My very nature? Was that really a risk I could take? The witch interrupted me before I could finish. "You have a choice. You can either control the curse and run the risk of turning into something more sinister than you could have ever dreamed, or you can break it and lose everything. But be aware that you must fully embrace the darkness if you want to master it." I was choking on her words, which hung in the air like a fog. "What if we say no?" Reinaldo inquired, his voice tense with fear and rage. The witch's mouth quirked with laughter. "The curse will then continue to exist, and you'll be doomed, but not in the manner you desire." My heart ached as I turned to face Reinaldo. I could see the pain in his eyes, the same uncertainty gnawing at his insides. However, I was unable to assist him. I was unable to make this decision for him. "Valeria," he said softly, his hand brushing against mine. "We've made it this far. I won't let you decide on your own. Whatever comes together, we'll deal with it. However, The truth was too much to handle. I could already feel the curse's cold fingers encircling my heart and weighing me down. To save everyone, would I really put everything on the line? Was losing the one thing that made life worthwhile worth the cost of preserving our planet? Then, as I was about to speak, the environment changed. A crackling energy in the air, a sudden surge of power, ripped through the room. Rinaldo steadied me with a worried expression as my knees gave way and I reached for him. The witch's face darkened. "It has already started," she muttered. A voice that sent shivers down my spine reverberated in my head before I could comprehend the words. "Valeria Montoya, you are powerless to change your destiny. You have already made up your mind." I looked around wildly as my blood ran cold. "Who is present?" I insisted. A sly smile twisted the witch's face. "You'll find out soon enough." With my heart pounding in my chest, I turned to face Rinaldo. What was she trying to say? What did I do? He didn't respond. The air around us crackled, and I realized with a sickening certainty that the curse, whatever it was far from over. We didn't have freedom. Not just yet. Furthermore, the magic's darkest aspect was just getting started. Could we survive what was to come, or had we already sealed our fate? I didn't know, but I could feel the shadows closing in. Chapters were 43, Emiliano's POV. I was finished. For so long, the words had been accumulating inside of me, becoming heavier every day. I knew I had no other option today. I had to say them. Nothing, not even a threat or a guilt trip, could make me go back now, and I had to tell my father that. I was standing in front of my father's study door, feeling like a boulder under the weight of what was about to happen. I could hear him talking to someone inside, but I was unable to understand what he was saying. I felt as though I was standing on a precipice with no way out, and the tension in the air was suffocating. I muttered to myself, "You can do this," but my words sounded hollow because of the doubt in my chest. I inhaled deeply before knocking. As I remembered, my father's voice was firm and sharp as he said, "Enter." I pushed the door open and entered. With papers arranged in front of him, Santiago sat at his desk. Even though he didn't look up, I could sense that he was watching me. "Emiliano, what is it?" He spoke in a chilly tone. Despite the storm raging inside of me, I said, "I've come to talk, Father," in a steady voice. "I refuse to return to the pack. I will not abandon him." There was silence for a moment as the words lingered in the air. My father's jaw tensed, and his fingers ceased moving across the papers. "You must comprehend, Emiliano," Santiago said slowly as he finally looked me in the eye. "This is the family you were born into. You should be loyal to your pack, to your blood, not just any boy." My fists clenched. "He's no ordinary boy. He is my friend. I will no longer pretend. You have known that for years." Anger blazed in my father's eyes. "Emiliano, you have no say in this matter. You have Montoya ancestry. Since you are this pack's future, you won't abandon everything for someone who... Who is it?" I interrupted him and moved forward. "Who cares for me? Who sees me for who I truly am? Who, in spite of everything, accepts me?" I was caught off guard when he abruptly stood up. "This, your refusal to follow the path we have set for you, will not tarnish my son's name." "Then reject me," I yelled before I could stop the words from spilling out. "I won't choose anything but him, so if you can't accept me for who I am, then disown me." The truth was what I said, even though it hurt to say it. I couldn't give up now, even though it felt like my heart was being ripped apart by every second. Not when I was looking directly into the face of everything I had ever feared. Anger twisted Santiago's face. "I won't plead with you to stay. Without your family in this pack, you are nothing. Emiliano, all you'll be is an outsider, a failure." The overwhelming weight of what I was about to do was the reason I was shaking now, not fear. I'll be whoever I have to be. I refuse to live my life worrying about what you or anybody else may think. I'm not going to let him go. Not for anyone, not for you. My dad's face grew serious. "So you aren't my son anymore." I felt like I was slapped by the words. The blood drained from my face. I never imagined it would get to this point. "You can't." With a voice that sliced through me like a knife, he said, "I can." "Emiliano, you have severed our connection. You have destroyed your position within this pack and family. You might not come back." It struck me in the chest with its finality. I stood my ground even though my body shook and my vision briefly became blurry. I was forced to. for him, for myself. I said in a tight voice, "I'm sorry, Father," but I didn't say I was sorry for what I was doing. I was unable to. With a soft thump that seemed to reverberate in my brain, the door shut behind me as I turned and walked away. I had anticipated this. Nothing could have prepared me for the weight of the emptiness left behind, even though I knew it would hurt. I wasn't sorry, though. I couldn't be. Mateo was standing outside when I arrived, his expression softening. Without saying anything, he simply put his hand on my shoulder and offered me the assistance I was unaware I required. Quietly, he said, "Want to talk?" Refusing to cry, I shook my head. "No, he whispered, "you did what you had to. However, you can't turn back now. What comes next?" My thoughts were racing as I stared at him. Now the world felt different. It seemed as though everything had changed, and I was standing in an area with a hazy ground beneath me. However, I was unable to return. My voice broke as I said, "I don't know. But I won't flee from this." After Mateo gave me a shoulder squeeze, we stood silently and observed our surroundings. I couldn't help but feel that something was coming to an end as the sun was lowering and the estate was covered in long shadows. However, I wasn't doomed. "Where are you going?" After a long silence, Mateo asked. "I'm not sure," I said again, "but I won't be by myself." I could hear Santiago's aloof, irate voice echoing in my head as I turned to go. However, it was now irrelevant. It was up to me to decide the way forward, and I refused to let fear rule my actions. Despite the uncertainty of the future, I was certain that I had made my decision. But how much would it cost? Would my partner's love be sufficient to justify this sacrifice? And would I ever be able to reconcile with my family? Chapter 44. Reinaldo's POV. I had to stop escaping this. The threat from rogue wolves was no longer the only one. Everything was falling apart more quickly than I could keep up with, including the games played by the Underworld Council, Malik's never-ending schemes, and the strained allegiances of my pack. There was no more time for caution. Even though I didn't trust the people I had to rely on, I had to make decisions now. The weight of the impending conversation weighed heavily on my chest as I sat in the darkened room. Saving my pack wasn't the only goal here. It was a matter of survival, the survival of my pack. Furthermore, I would reach out to an adversary if necessary, even if that adversary had been the most formidable foe of my father. "Are you certain about this?" My thoughts were interrupted by Mateo's voice. I could hear the worry in his voice. He had been with me since the start of this war. "I don't have a choice, Mateo," I said, rubbing my temples. "We need every ally we can find. We'll be done if we don't get together." "But Reinaldo, a rival pack? For centuries they have been the adversaries of your family." "I understand. However, if Malik Blackthorn takes over this region and the renegade wolves are successful," I didn't complete the idea. He was aware of my destination. I stood up when the leader of the opposing pack entered through the open door. "Reinaldo Vargas," he said in a chilly, calculating tone. "I never imagined the day would come when we would have to cooperate." I shot back, looking him in the eye. "You're not the only one." Desperation made odd bedfellows, but his pack had been a thorn in our side for years. I stood tall and declared, "We now have a common enemy. Blackthorn Malik. His forces are becoming more powerful every day, and we will both lose everything if we don't cooperate." He considered his options as he looked at me. "You're correct. Reinaldo, know this, though. I don't trust you. You would be foolish to put your trust in me." I answered, "At the moment, I don't trust anyone. However, we are both aware of the stakes. We must fight together or perish separately." After a lengthy period of silence, he nodded in agreement. "For the time being, I'll work with you, but keep in mind that this partnership is shaky, comprehensive. The unwritten agreement between us was heavy as we shook hands. I was still feeling uneasy as we left the meeting. How much time would this take? And would I regret putting my trust in someone who had long been my adversary? I didn't anticipate the ambush coming so quickly. When the attack occurred, we were only a few miles outside of our boundaries. With their snarls filling the air, rogue wolves led by Malik's supporters charged at us. My heart raced as I reached for my blade, realizing that we weren't just fighting for territory anymore. This was a fight for our lives. "Get ready," I shouted, rallying my warriors. The rival pack leader and I fought side by side, but the tension was thick in the air. We had no true trust in each other, and it showed. His eyes flickered nervously every time I swung my sword close to him, but he was ruthless in battle, dispatching foes with brutal efficiency. "Pay attention!" Knowing that the real battle was yet to come, I screamed at him. "Remain alert!" Unrelenting, the rogue wolves attacked us from every direction. The ground was covered in blood, and the air was heavy with the stench of death. Everything briefly seemed to be in disarray, a haze of snarls and clashing metal. Knowing that we would be overrun if we didn't hold our ground, I gave it my all in the battle. After what seemed like hours, the final rogue wolf was brought down. However, the harm was already done. Both my pack and the opposing pack were worn out, bruised, and bloodied. I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle had only just begun. As he wiped blood from his blade, the rival pack leader moved to stand next to me. We survived, for the time being. My thoughts were racing as I gazed out over the battlefield. The battle was far from over. Malik Blackthorn was no longer the only enemy. I wasn't yet aware of the forces that were at work in the shadows. My communications buzzed at that moment. The Underworld Council has sent a message. I narrowed my eyes, knowing this wouldn't be good. As usual, the message was cryptic. "Alpha, you did a great job, but keep in mind that this is just the start. The key still lies with you and your partner. Even allies can pose as enemies, so be cautious about whom you put your trust in." My blood froze. By that, what did they mean? I turned to the rival pack leader. "We have a bigger problem," I said, my voice low. "The council has spoken. I don't think they're done with me yet." He narrowed his eyes, sensing the seriousness of my words. "What do we do now?" With my heart heaving under the weight of what was to come, I said, "I don't know. However, I am aware of one thing. This war cannot be fought by us alone. Every second seemed to add to the darkness that enveloped us. I never thought the stakes would be this high. Would this new partnership last? Or was I just falling into a bigger snare? Chapter 45, Valeria's POV. I was beginning to crumble under the weight of it all, the conflicts, the treachery, the unending doubt. Even though I had always known that the battle with Malik Blackthorn would be difficult, the curse that bound Ronaldo and me felt heavier than ever as I stood in the old library of the Vargas mansion. It was connected to everything, not just us. My ancestry, his lineage, our households. The smell of old paper permeated the air as I ran my fingers over the dusty bookshelves. The mansion was eerily silent, and the silence only intensified my thoughts. If only briefly, I had come here to get away from the mayhem. However, I discovered more than I had anticipated. I took an old leather-bound book off the shelf and opened it to see if there was anything I could learn about the curse. I looked at the old manuscript, written in a language that was both familiar and unfamiliar. I read the words out loud, and they seemed to burn into my brain. With my heart pounding, I muttered, "The curse is not of dark magic." It was a sacrifice, a blood tie that unites two families for all time. My breath caught as I froze. A sacrifice? What was meant by that? Desperate to understand what I was reading, I turned the pages more quickly now. We weren't cursed with malice or evil intent. It was made by my own ancestors, connected to the Vargas lineage, and intended to unite our families in a way that no one could sever long before Ronaldo and I were even born. "Generations of sacrifice," I muttered. "This is a part of something greater than ourselves." I felt like screaming. There was a strange feeling of comprehension in the other part, as if I had been walking in the dark for a long time and had only recently discovered the light. However, this discovery only led to more inquiries. How could a curse tie two families together like this? What sacrifice was necessary to create a bond like that? And why had it been handed down through the generations? With my heart bouncing in my chest, I spun around as the door behind me creaked. Ronaldo stood there with an unreadable expression. He said softly as he approached me, "I thought you might be here." "Ronaldo," I uttered, fighting for control. "I discovered something concerning the curse." He drew nearer, his eyes darting to the book pages in my grasp. "What is it?" My eyes widened in realization as I glanced up at him. Dark magic did not create the curse. It's not a simple mishap. It's a curse passed down through generations, one that was intended to permanently bring our families together. Ronaldo's forehead creased as he took in what I had to say. That is illogical. Why would your forefathers act in that manner? With a growing sense of frustration in my chest, I said, I don't know. However, it was a long ago decision and a sacrifice. Reinaldo, it's connected to our ancestry. There is more than fate that binds us together. Clearly disturbed, he ran a hand through his hair. Everything is changed by this. I answered, my voice just above a whisper, I know, but there's more. An ancient map was nestled between the brittle pages when I turned the page. It marked a location deep in the mountains and was quite detailed. I traced the location with my finger and said, it states here that the first Alpha King made the original sacrifice. It all started in a sanctuary tucked away in the mountains. With his gaze fixed on the map, Reinaldo took a step forward. We must locate it. With my heart racing, I nodded. But we're not the only ones looking for it. It will also be under the control of the Underworld Council. From the shadows, they have been controlling everything. What if they arrive first? My stomach turned at the thought. We were unable to allow them to discover it. Whatever it was, whatever it contained, we had to get there before they did. It might hold the secret to lifting the curse, or it might be used against us all. Reinaldo spoke in a solemn, low voice. Then we leave. Together. With my heart in my throat, I gazed up at him. How do we even begin? With a determined expression on his face, he stated, we locate the sanctuary. We arrive first. Additionally, we shield it from the council. I couldn't get rid of the thought that it was already too late, though, even as he was saying it. Beyond the council, beyond Malik Blackthorn, beyond the curse, something else was hiding in the shadows. Something none of us could have predicted. The weight of the past seemed to be bearing down on me as the air around us grew heavier. I could feel the curse pulling at me again, this time more intensely, more painfully. Even though I had no idea what lay ahead, I felt as if I could hear my ancestors' voices in the back of my mind telling me to keep going. My voice trembled as I whispered, I'll do whatever it takes. But I can't let you go. Everything else briefly vanished as Reinaldo's eyes softened. His thumb brushed my cheek as he reached out and cupped my face in his hands. You won't, he pledged. This will not be lost. However, I was unable to get rid of the fear that had taken hold of my chest as he spoke. We were on our way to something new, something that would alter everything. And no matter how hard I tried to push it away, I knew we couldn't outrun the truth for long. Who would find the sanctuary first? The Pax, or the Council of the Underworld? And what would we uncover once we got there? The solutions were available, and like a shadow in the distance, they were calling to me but were just out of reach. Would we be ready for what we found, or had we already stepped into a game we couldn't control? Chapter 46, Reinaldo's POV. I was delving further into something that I still didn't fully comprehend. I had always understood that our battle was more than pack politics or rogue wolves. However, now that Valeria was with me, the stakes were higher and more intimate. The curse was ingrained in our DNA and wasn't simply something to be broken. The decisions I had to make were more difficult than ever, and the weight of it was oppressive. In the silence of the Vargas mansion, I watched Valeria move forward. She refused to speak, even though I could feel her thoughts pressing down on me like a storm cloud. Too many revelations and too much pressure had been bearing down on us both over the last few days. We had to locate this haven, the one with the curse's key in it, the beginning of it all. Are you prepared? Mateo stood close by, his eyes narrowed in worry, and asked. I spoke softly as I nodded. We don't have much time. The group we had gathered, Mateo and a couple of trusted warriors, was small, but we didn't need an army. We required clarification. We left right away. Valeria had found a map that took us to the center of the mountains. It was a long and perilous journey. I couldn't help but feel the weight of the unknown bearing down on me as we pushed through rocky terrain and dense forests. We seemed to be moving deeper into the shadows with each step. The atmosphere changed as we arrived at the sanctuary. The energy was heavier, older, and different. Located in a hollowed-out mountain pass, the sanctuary's entrance was nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. As we entered, I inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the space descend upon me. It seemed antiquated, as if the walls themselves were observing us. Are we certain of this? Mateo inquired in a nervous tone. I said, "No turning back," despite the doubt that weighed heavily on my own heart. The air became colder as we went farther into the sanctuary. It appeared to get darker as we traveled farther. In the corners of my vision, shadows appeared to dance. Something old was waiting here. The air suddenly crackled, and a tall figure with luminous eyes and a powerful aura arose from the shadows. I recognized the creature in front of me and froze. It wasn't just a wolf or a man. It was something else entirely, something tied to the curse. "You have come," the being said, its voice echoing off the walls. "I have waited for you, Alpha King." With my heart pounding, I took a step forward. "Who are you?" With a voice akin to a thunderclap, the creature answered, "I am the guardian of the curse. I protect the price of the power that runs in your family, the secrets of the past." "What prevented you from stopping us?" Mateo inquired in a defensive tone. Mateo was the target of the creature's glowing eyes. "It was always meant to be. Your ancestries are connected, you can't avoid it." The words hit me hard, my ancestry. The curse, all of it was a part of something greater, something that could not be avoided. Even though I had always known that the weight of my responsibilities had a purpose, it was still too much to bear to hear this now and see the reality of it in this ancient creature's eyes. "You want to break the curse, but you cannot," the creature continued, its voice heavy with truth. "The curse is tied to your very existence. It serves as the link between the Montoya and Vargas bloodlines. Breaking it would mean cutting off the very essence of who you are. It was never intended to be reversed." I gave a head shake. There must be a method. The creature moved closer, his energy flickering form. "You are the key to both salvation and destruction. The Alpha Kings before you have ruled with this burden. But you must know this. To control the curse, you must give up something invaluable." My heart sank as I realized what he was implying. "A sacrifice," I muttered. "Yes," the creature said, "a leadership and soul sacrifice. You won't be able to control the curse until then. You can alter the future only after that." His words weighed heavily on me as I staggered back. Am I able to do this? Could I give up everything I had ever known, everything I had ever fought for, in order to save Valeria, my pack, and the future? Will Valeria have to pay the same amount? My voice was hardly more than a whisper as I asked. The creature gave me an unreadable look. "You are both bound by the curse, but the person in charge bears the real cost. Valeria will follow you if you decide to exert control over it, but her journey will be more sinister than you may think." A sickening wave of fear swept over me. So what should I do? The creature's eyes became more radiant. "You have to make a choice. Risk your soul by controlling the curse, or allow it to devour you both." With my heart thumping in my chest, I turned away. "I'm not sure if I can decide on this." The creature said, "You will. You have to. Your fate has already been predetermined." My mind spinning, I clenched my fists. The decision I had to make carried too much weight. I had to choose between losing everything and preserving the future. His last words reverberated in my ears as the creature's form started to disappear into the darkness. "Time is of the essence. Make your choice, Reinaldo Vargas." My heart was divided between duty and desire as I stood in the sanctuary's darkness. I was unsure of my ability to make the best decision, but I was running out of time to do so. The future of my pack, my family, and the woman I loved, everything depended on what I chose next. How much will it cost? When Valeria discovers the real cost of lifting the curse, how will she respond? Chapter 047, Emiliano's POV. I felt the weight of my father's rejection like a constant ache in my chest. His words seemed to sting me every time I moved. The road ahead felt lonelier every day, even though I knew I couldn't go back. My relationship with my partner had only gotten closer in spite of everything. He was my constant and my rock. However, that did not ease the isolation. All I had left were the vows I had made to protect him after the one person who was meant to mentor me disowned and abandoned me. I required clarification. I needed someone to explain everything to me. I went to the elder for that reason. As I walked into the tiny room, the scent of parchment and old leather filled my nostrils, and the air was heavy with incense. The elderly woman, whose eyes were full of age and wisdom, looked up from her work. When she saw me, her face softened. "Emiliano," she said softly to me, "why have you come here?" I said, my voice rough from the weight of my choices. I need guidance. I'm not sure if I made the correct decision. I took the seat across from her when she motioned for me to do so. Her eyes narrowed as though she already knew the answer to the question. You seek answers to your future? Yes, I said, finding it difficult to say. I must ascertain whether I am destined to interrupt the cycle, the conflict cycle between the Vargas and the Montoyas. For a long time, the elder remained silent. Lost in thought, her eyes fell to the ground. Her voice was sorrowful when she finally spoke. Emiliano, there is a prophecy, one that is concealed deep within the Montoya family's lineage. My heart skipped a beat. A foretelling? It describes a moment when a Montoya family member would have to decide whether to unite the packs or split them apart, she added. The prophecy refers to you. I blinked, unsure of what to say. I'm the one? You are, she said. Your bloodline is tied to the curse, and the only person who can alter it is you. Her words struck me like a ton of bricks. I was aware that my choices had consequences, but this was beyond my comprehension. More to myself than to anyone else, I muttered, I didn't ask for this. I just want to protect him, my mate. The elder's eyes softened. Emiliano, you'll need to defend more than just him. You'll need to keep them all safe. I could feel the weight of the responsibility weighing me down like a cloak. However, how? How can I break the cycle? Slowly, the elder shook her head. You already possess the solution. It always has. But you must be willing to face the truth of your lineage. You must decide whether you will break the cycle or perpetuate it. The words echoed in my mind as I left her chamber, the weight of the prophecy sitting heavy on my shoulders. Was I the one who could bring peace, or was I destined to be the one who tore it all apart? As I walked back toward the heart of the pack, my thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, loud howl in the distance. My entire body stiffened. Rogue wolves, I muttered under my breath. The assault was sudden and swift. With the familiar rush of combat pulsing through me, I hurried to the front lines. I couldn't decide which was worse, the actual fight or the nagging anxiety that I wasn't prepared for what was coming. I fought with all of my strength, killing rogue wolves one by one as my body moved instinctively. I couldn't let the pack fall, even though it hurt my heart. I couldn't allow these monsters to tear apart my partner or my family. At last, after what seemed like hours, the remaining rogue wolves were dead and covered in blood at my feet. The pack stood around me, panting, the rush of adrenaline gradually fading. Mateo took a step forward, his expression somber. We haven't left the woods yet. More is on the horizon. I sense it. I nodded, my mind racing but my body hurting from the fight. I felt the weight of the prophecy pulling me in two different directions. How could I save them all if I wasn't sure I could save myself? Just as the tension began to settle, a messenger arrived. The words he spoke were simple, but they hit me like a punch in the gut. His voice was low as he said, "It's from your father. You have to go back to the pack," he says, "or suffer the repercussions." I experienced an intense aching sadness after a chilly rush of rage. My dad wanted me to return, to flex the knee. However, I was unable to return. I had already decided. I felt betrayed by Santiago's message, which served as a reminder that although I had distanced myself from my family, I was still unable to avoid them. I said in a firm voice, "I won't go back. I am unable to return to my former self. I refuse to live my life under his control." However, a weighty sensation took hold of my chest as I turned to go. The message from my father was unambiguous. There would be repercussions if I didn't rejoin the group. Furthermore, I wasn't sure if I was prepared to confront them. How much would it cost me to take this route? How much would my family have to pay? More significantly, would I have the strength to shield my partner from the fallout from my decisions? I had no idea. I was going to find out, though. Would I be claimed by the prophecy, or could I change the future? Chapter 48, Valeria's POV. I could feel the weight of the curse suffocating me as it tightened around me. It was a presence rather than merely a chain. It followed every step I took. My heart hurt to know that it connected me to Reinaldo, but it seemed impossible to break. What if it cost too much? What if he were lost, if the curse was broken? I was unable to remain motionless any longer. I needed to know more after learning all I had. I required clarification, not just from Reinaldo or the maps, but from someone who was more knowledgeable about this curse and could be honest with me. Even though Reinaldo had shared all of his knowledge with me, there were still too many questions. Too much uncertainty remained. I needed an experienced person, someone who, long before we were involved, had witnessed the evil magic in action. I went in search of the seer for that reason. I had heard whispered stories about her extensive knowledge of both light and dark magic. Having lived for centuries, she was older than most, and nobody truly understood how she had managed to stay alive this long. She was both a reality and a myth. The seer resided in a tiny, remote cabin tucked away in the forest, out of sight. The trip took a long time, and the silence was oppressive as I made my way through the thick forest. The earth itself seemed to be holding its breath, anticipating my arrival at my destination. The cabin appeared ordinary, almost too ordinary, when I finally got there. As though it had been waiting for me, the door creaked open. The air was heavy with incense and herbs when I entered. With her back to me, a figure sat by the window. I knew the seer knew I was there, even though she didn't look at me. With a deep and perceptive voice, she stated, "You've come for answers." Unsure of what to say, I swallowed hard. I must know the curse's real nature, the one binding Reinaldo and me together. With dark and intense eyes, the seer cocked her head slightly. "Child, you don't realize how old the curse you mention is. The Vargas and Montoya bloodlines were not the only ones who created it. Something darker gave birth to it, a third lineage connected to the Underworld Council." A beat skipped in my chest. "What?" The seer's expression was solemn as she stared at me. "Long before your family was ever involved, the council was already pulling strings. The purpose of the curse was to manipulate you and your family. It will now be the decisive factor in your pack's destiny." With her words weighing heavily on me, I staggered back. The Council of the Underworld? Although I had a hunch they were somehow involved, this was worse than I could have ever guessed. They were a part of the curse itself, not merely a manipulator of us. "How does this affect Reinaldo and me?" My voice trembled as I asked. I couldn't quite read the glint in the seer's eyes. "It implies that the curse extends beyond your relationship. There is a cycle that was destined to recur." A wave of nausea swept over me. "We can't break it then? Is there no escape route?" A faint smile played at the corner of the seer's lips, but it was unsettling. "There is a way, but it costs money, a cost you might not be prepared to incur." My breath caught. "How much is it?" She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Controlling the curse is where its real power resides, but you have to master its darkest magic to master it. You will lose a piece of yourself if you decide to control it. Your heart, your soul. Unless you give up something priceless, the curse will consume you." The realization of the truth made my knees weaken. What if I have no control over it? The seer narrowed her eyes and cocked her head. "It will then take control of you, and everything you value will be destroyed." A chilly perspiration appeared on my forehead. Was that the price I was willing to pay? To save everyone else, was I willing to sacrifice a piece of myself? The seer got up and approached me slowly. "You have a choice, Valeria, but keep in mind that the curse is more than just a power. It's a test of your will, of your power, and of your affection." As I stood there rooted to the spot, her words replayed in my mind. I knew the curse was dangerous, but this was more than I could handle. "You must decide quickly," the seer cautioned, her tone softening. "The curse will get stronger the longer you wait." My heart heaving from the weight of what I had discovered and my mind racing, I turned to go. However, the seer made one final cry before I could get to the door. "Valeria, there's one more thing." I stopped and looked at her. "The map you discovered," she remarked. "It leads to a historic sanctuary. It is believed to contain the secret to lifting the curse. You have to exercise caution, though, because the person who gets there first will be able to control the full force of the curse. Are you going to be the one? Or the Council of the Underworld?" My blood froze. I had to get ahead of the Underworld Council, who were already in motion. As I walked out of the cabin, my mind was racing with all I had discovered. The weight of the curse and the decisions it required were too much to bear. Without losing everything, how could I break the curse? And if I couldn't, what would happen? I had no answers. However, I was aware that time was running out, and I had to decide, would I be able to break the curse, or would it devour me? Chapter 049, Reinaldo's POV. Although I had always carried the burden of leadership, it felt more pressing than ever at this moment. Every choice I made felt like it had a cost, and I could feel the curse encircling me more tightly, serving as a continual reminder of my authority and responsibility. My job as Alpha King had always been to keep my pack safe, but now I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into something much darker. I couldn't stand idly by any longer. The prophecy, the curse, the Underworld Council, all of it was coming for us. I needed to take charge, and I needed to do it quickly before we were completely engulfed. So I decided. In order to stand together against the approaching darkness, I urged all of the pack leaders to assemble. I stood in front of them at the start of the meeting, feeling the pressure of what I had to say. Despite the storm raging inside of me, I said, "We are at the edge," in a steady voice. Malik Blackthorn and the Underworld Council are more than just adversaries. They pose a threat to all of our hard-won gains. Even if it means losing everything, I'm prepared to face whatever comes next. With wary eyes, the pack leaders shifted in their seats. Some listened respectfully to what I had to say, while others appeared unsure or even doubtful. Their uncertainty was palpable to me. With a cautious tone, one of the more senior pack leaders raised his voice. "Reinaldo, you speak of facing the darkness, but what of the curse? What it's doing to you cannot be ignored. To everyone." His words stung me. The curse was now a part of me, interwoven with my ancestry and no longer merely a burden. It had influenced both my ancestors and me. However, I couldn't allow it to define me, no longer. I said, quietly but firmly, "I know the cost." However, we cannot afford to watch as the Underworld Council robs us of everything. We must decide our future, but the prophecy has brought us here. We can overcome any obstacle if we unite. The next to speak was a younger leader with a fiery voice. "But Reinaldo, can you guide us? When you're bearing the burden of the curse, can you really protect us? Despite being our Alpha King, you are not unbeatable." I felt the challenge in his words as we locked eyes. I'm not unbeatable. However, if I allow someone else to fight this battle for me, I will be damned. I could see the uncertainty that pervaded the room and the doubt in their eyes. They still didn't fully trust me, and I couldn't hold them responsible. We had previously been torn apart by the curse and the prophecy, and now I was pleading with them to believe in me when I wasn't sure myself. I couldn't give up, though. Not right now. I grew more adamant as I said, "We don't have time to waste. The Underworld Council is in motion already. If we don't take action right away, it will be too late, because Malik Blackthorn is siding with them. We must set aside our differences and fight as a team." A long silence fell. One could feel the tension in the room. The pack leaders finally started nodding, one by one. The choice was already made. Together, we were in this. However, I got a message at the end of the meeting that made my stomach turn. A messenger with a somber expression came into the room. "The Underworld Council are assembling their forces, Reinaldo," he declared. "Malik Blackthorn is on their side. The real fight is about to start." A shiver went through me. This was the start of a war that would alter everything, not just a struggle for survival. "We need to get ready," I said quietly. "Combine our forces. We must prevent them from gaining the upper hand." I remained behind as the pack leaders departed, my head reeling from everything I had just discovered. The Underworld Council was now directly in front of us, rather than merely a specter on the horizon. What about Malik Blackthorn? He wasn't your average alpha. He was a weapon that could wipe us all out. Mateo had been standing quietly by my side when I turned to face him. "We must move quickly," I stated, maintaining a steady tone of voice despite my internal turmoil. "Never have the stakes been higher." Mateo nodded, resolve shining in his eyes. "We'll be prepared." However, as he spoke, I couldn't get rid of the thought that we were about to fall into a trap. Always lurking just out of reach, the Underworld Council had been a shadow. They were directly above us now. Furthermore, I questioned whether we had the strength to confront them. Could we prevent them before it was too late? Could I defend my family, the woman I loved, and the pack? Or would we all be destroyed by the Underworld Council? I started to question whether we were prepared for the impending battle. Chapter 050, Emiliano's POV. I could feel the pressure of my choice bearing down on me. I felt as though I was leaving behind everything I had ever known with each step I took outside the Montoya estate. However, it was for her, for my friend. The Underworld Council were constantly hiding in the shadows, and the rogue wolves were becoming more daring. I was aware that I was running out of time to decide. However, a voice called my name as I was ready to go. When I turned, I saw him, Alberto, my cousin. His expression was icy, and his eyes were dark. "Emiliano," he uttered softly. "Where do you anticipate going?" I felt my heart pound as I clenched my fists. I didn't want to face him, not right now. However, I couldn't help but notice that there was something strange in his tone. "I'm going," I said sharply. "Additionally, I won't be returning. Not to anybody, not to the pack." A smirk formed on Alberto's lips. "You think you can just walk away? You know, you're not the only one with options." I became aware that something was amiss, and my chest constricted. He seemed to know something I didn't, based on the way he was staring at me. "What are you discussing?" He squinted his eyes. "Emiliano, you're not the only one with secrets. You believe you can get away, but once things have started, there's no turning back." My neck's hair stood on end. I felt cold from the undertone of what he said. "What have you done?" My voice trembled as I asked. Alberto took a while to respond. Rather, his smile deepened as he stepped closer. "You ought to have avoided getting involved in this. The Montoya family doesn't simply let people go." Everything clicked in that instant. The betrayal was like a kick to the stomach. Alberto wasn't merely getting in my way. He contributed to the issue. He had been collaborating with the Underworld Council and Malik Blackthorn. All along, he had been a traitor. "Alberto." The realization crushed me, causing my voice to break. "You have been collaborating with them all this time." He didn't dispute it. He didn't have to. It was all in the smirk on his face. "You don't get it, do you?" he asked in a chilly tone. "You and your little partner aren't the only ones involved. This surpasses all of us, larger than the packs. Emiliano, you are merely a pawn in their scheme." I felt a surge of anger. How could he have betrayed his own blood in this way? How could he turn on me? I stepped forward and yelled, "You're wrong. I refuse to be used as a pawn by anyone. I won't allow you to ruin all of my hard work, everything that I hold dear." Something darker flashed in Alberto's eyes as his expression changed. "You believe you can put an end to this? Do you believe you can make any changes? What is about to happen cannot be avoided. Emiliano, you can't outrun it no matter what you do." In an instant, I knew what needed to be done. I couldn't let him go. Not after his actions. I swung at him, my fists flying, each punch fueled by unfiltered emotion. Anger was trembling through my body, but I was unable to stop. Not until he realized that I was not going to back down. Not until he realized that I wouldn't simply let him ruin everything. He retaliated with equal ferocity, but I sensed a difference. It wasn't in his heart. He didn't care. He was a traitor. I disarmed him with a quick twist, causing the dagger he was holding to clatter to the ground. He had a shocked, angry expression on his face. I gasped and said, "You've lost," my heart pounding. "You're not leaving." However, something continued to nag at me even as I stood triumphant. The betrayal was profound. I was also unaware of its extent. With each breath, my chest rose and fell as I gazed down at him. "Why, Alberto? Why do this?" He darkened his eyes and smiled sourly. "Because the real battle hasn't even started yet." As his words sank in, my heart skipped a beat. What was he discussing? Which fight was he talking about? With venom in his voice, he whispered, "You'll never be able to outrun what's coming. It's too late." I felt a chill go down my back. Alberto gave me a final smirk before getting up and leaving me motionless. I kept thinking that there were other people with secrets besides him, that something far more significant was going on, something I hadn't even started to comprehend. The outlaw wolves, the Council of the Underworld. And now, Alberto, all of this was a part of something far more dangerous than I could have ever envisioned. For what exactly was I fighting, and could I trust anyone else in my life?